I mean, whoever has the most toys, I think, is an idiot and failed. So,
Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Podcast US, one of the world's biggest gun talk programs. Thanks for joining us here as we talk about interesting stuff in the world of shooting. Of course, I'm your host, Brent Weed, and I'm joined by my co-host, Roy Huntington, and we're going to cover some good stuff today. So, Roy, let's get started. How's it going?
I want to get started.
Okay.
Because we have some stuff to say today. Yeah.
We do. And this is a topic that kind of came from, it's kind of a combination topic, and I think it's a important thing to talk about. And we're going to talk about, when does gear stop mattering? And this is kind of a theme we have talked about a lot here on this program, but I thought, let's drill down specifically into it today. And the topic itself, what I'm saying here is, as we have, if you've watched any of our previous episodes, is at some point we all upgrade our gear, and we all have the mistaken belief, even at my age and Roy's age, where we think, if I just buy that holster, that optic, that scope, that Master Blaster 5000, suddenly I will be Robbie Latham and Lena Mishlik, and it never works out that way. So we're going to kind of analyze where it falls on the sweet spot, and kind of our take on what we've seen over many decades of shooting. So, Roy, gear does matter, but it doesn't matter that much. Is that about as an ambiguous statement as I could possibly make?
No, you're exactly right. I mean, if you gave the average decent shooter I know, even if they have higher end equipment, if you gave them a box stock Glock pistol or a box stock, you fill in the blank, maybe even like a high point, and you had them shoot the weekend match, I bet you they would do really well.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a few percentage points below maybe what they normally would have scored, but if you take another shooter who's a beginning shooter, and you give him that competitor's high-end, fancy-ass, double-stack, red dot scoped, pistol, the beginning shooter is not going to shoot really any better.
Exactly.
I mean, they're still going to miss. They're still going to fumble their reloads. They're still going to do all that kind of stuff. So, I equate it to tool usage. I think virtually everyone watching or listening to this is a tool user. It's just because that's what we do, right? And I first started doing lathe work and machine work, 40 years ago, right? Well, I started with a little tiny Unimat lathe, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I messed everything up. As I learned it, I began to understand how the machine works better, and my hand-eye coordination skills got better. And then I realized the machine was limiting what I wanted to do and could do. So I bought a bigger, better one, right? And at first, I couldn't really use the machine to its full ability, and I was wasting the machine's time, kind of,
Yeah.
I would turn it on, you could hear it groan and say, oh, great, what's he going to mess up this time,
I'll get one of those fingers if I can.
I know, that's the thing. But yet, 25 years goes by or something, and you reach a point where you realize you're working this machine at its limits, and your skill set is good enough that it's like you want better. Now I can make use of it. So a couple of years ago, I bought a really, really nice lathe and milling machine, and it was so satisfying because it allowed me to do that extra kind of like 5%. It's more accurate. It runs a little smoother. It's more predictable. It gives me information I didn't have before. And shooting is exactly the same way. And I know it's like people accuse us of beating this into the dirt, but it's in comments constantly. What gun should I buy? I want to participate in weekend matches, and I don't know. This guy has a $5,000 1911. Do I need to have that in order to compete? You've heard them. You get all the same comments and questions that I do. And then they almost don't want to believe you when you say
that's absolutely true.
You really don't need to do that. Well, the guy at the gun store said that I would be shooting myself in the foot, literally and figuratively, if I just
Yeah.
bought an entry level, gun. And it's like you can't explain that. It's why I like to teach women, because when women often, it's really interesting. We're getting more and more women watch our videos and
Yeah.
listen to the YouTube, our stuff here, but most of them are a little older. And when they ask a question like, "Hey, I want to go squirrel hunting and I'm not sure which gun I should buy," and if I tell them, "Oh, well, just go get yourself this simple entry level Savage bolt action 22 with an affordable scope," they go like this. They go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And then they go do it. And then usually a month or two later, I get a comment back saying, "Wow, Roy, you were exactly right. It's so interesting. I'm learning how to use it now. And I can see someday I may want a better gun." Right? Yeah. Now,
Exactly.
if we male egotistical idiots would only just do the same thing, we'd be all right.
Yeah. Well, there was a point I wanted to make before we get too much further out of the gate, and that is this is sort of kind of directed at the new shooter, but it applies to every single solitary one of us. And we've talked about this before, that I still fall prey to it. I get a press release, we get 50 to 100 a day, both of us. So anything and everything under the sun is coming our way saying, please, try this. And most of them would be kind enough to at least send it on a loan basis so we could try it. So you've got to think, okay, is that something my audience wants? Is that something I'm interested in? And could I effectively test it and get a meaningful way? And I still fall prey to that, oh, that's kind of cool. And I've got little alarm bells that go off because I think, okay, is it really cool or is it just new and unique? And that's the part that I'm enjoying or considering important, as opposed to, will it solve my problem, which is truly the basic question you need to be asking of all of your gear and tools and everything else. Will this solve my problem better, or at least as good as something more expensive or less expensive? So when you hear us, we'll talk a lot about newer shooters, less experienced shooters in this episode, but it applies to every ding dang single one of us that's in this audience, because especially the guys, we all fall prey to it. And I gotta say, we need to have a mea culpa moment here, that it's kind of our fault as members of the gun press. The whole thing is basically built on promoting new product. And that's one of the things that I do think Roy and I and FMG Publications, which we're still part of, have kind of railed against, that it's the shooter, not the gun or the gear or the holster or whatever. But, we don't ignore new gear and we don't ignore increases in technology, but buying something just for the sake of buying it and new, we've been pretty guilty of that, and still goes on. And I frankly think it's getting worse. So, as an educated consumer, when you're reading online gun mags, especially blogs and especially YouTubers, it's okay to get information there, but be educated and think, why are they talking about this? If they mention the product name 72 times in a 4-minute video, that should be a clue to thinking people. So I've given you about 15 threads there, Roy, so I'll be interested to see where you go with it.
Well, one thing I think we do, and I know I demanded it, excuse me, when I was editor of Handgunner, is that we could talk about all the new stuff, because that's why they buy the magazine. That's why they tune into the YouTube channel. That's where they want to see what's new. But it was always important that the delivery wasn't, hey, here's this cool new thing and you need it, right? The delivery was, here's this cool new thing. It does this and this and this and this. Or if any of these features and benefits are things that you think might benefit you, well, then here's one.
Yeah.
Right? Because I equate it, I'm going to go back to tool use. When I started woodworking 20 years ago, I went out and I bought all kinds of tools that I didn't need. And I thought I needed them, because you look at it and you think, oh, that looks cool. I'll be able to use that. And then as my experience grew, I realized that the only tools I bought eventually were tools that I actually needed to do the job. So if I was building a table and I needed a special router bit, I bought the special router bit. I didn't buy the 50-bit set. and which I had done
Sorry,
before.
Roy. Guilty.
Oh, I know we all are. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got like this 100-bit super big, wooden crate, router bit set that I bought
Yeah.
20 years ago. And I think I've used like maybe 8 of them
Yeah.
all the time. Those are the ones used all the time. But shooting is exactly the same way. And I think if you, as you say, just because they say, hey, here's this really cool, neat new thing, they do tend to want to make you get passionate and excited and get that endorphin dump and think that, oh, I need that, But and so what I caution people to do is, you bought your basic entry level gun. Now you've been practicing with it. You're learning how to use it. You're beginning to hit the target. You haven't shot yourself in the foot. The indoor range hasn't banned you from shooting there. So you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
We all know these people. And
yeah.
Now when you find yourself, it's like, when I draw from my holster, I wish I could get a better grip on the gun. Okay, well, now then let's look at holsters. You don't just buy the first holster that you see on Amazon.
Yeah.
Now you know what you're looking for, right? So you look at reviews, you look at what people say about it. Hey, this holster gives me a much better grip than I ever had before, right? Okay, well, that's good. So now you're buying something that actually improves on a technique that you have that you want improvement on. And so let's say you're shooting and you find yourself after a little while that the sights are not working for you as well as they could be working. Maybe you need bigger boulder sights. And so then you go to bigger boulder sights. I can equate this perfectly to something. If anyone out there is a scuba diver, I know you are. I am. I'm sure there's a lot of people out here. Well, I vividly remember and I remember the instructor because it was really funny. He knew exactly what was going to happen. We're all on the edge of the pool. We're all geared up. We've been told all the safety things. We've been practicing breathing on the edge of the pool. And then he said, all right, now I just want you to go under the water and clear your noses and just sit there for a minute. And so you do. And what do you think? You go, oh my God, I'm breathing underwater. Oh my God. Oh my God. And you look around and everyone's got big wide eyes behind their mask and bubbles are coming out in big streams and everything, right? We've all been there. So, and then after a couple minutes, he goes down and taps you on the shoulder and we come up and he goes, fun, huh? It's like, yeah. He said, all right, now you know what to expect. Now let's get down to business. And in a microcosm, the shooting is the same way. It's like because we've seen it. A guy buys his first gun or he rents a gun and has real bullets and he loads the magazine, and this is not a video game now, right? And he puts it into the gun and rests the slide. And it's like, oh my gosh, this, I'm breathing underwater, And then he pulls the gun up and there's a guy holding his arm so he doesn't shoot himself or the wall. And he pulls the trigger and the gun recoils and he's like, oh my God, I'm shooting, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, he should not go out Monday and buy a $5,000 1911, right? Because he has absolutely no idea what he needs or wants.
I was going to say, my first lesson in the pool. And what do you do at the end of the lesson? You put away your gear, get everything cleaned up, and then you walk out through the shop. I need 3 of these and I want to buy that. And what's the most expensive BC and regulator? And
charge card gets maxed out. I bought diving gear that I never used.
Exactly.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I was quit diving on the police department, I had this like raggedy old wetsuit with tears.
Yeah.
I had a soft weight belt. Remember those where you put lead shot in it, right?
Yeah.
I had a soft weight belt that I had stitched up a half a dozen times.
Yep.
My BC was worn, my mask was worn, and I could walk right through a diving store and see all the fancy stuff in the world. And it didn't interest me at all because what I had worked fine.
Yeah. And you raise an interesting point. I'm going sidebar here. When we buy stuff and you go to the range, you go to the dive site or whatever, at least with me, I always look at the guy with the kind of gear that's not in disrepair, but it's obviously been really well used. And, they call that salty. Your fatigues are coated in salt
Yeah.
and worn. And on one hand, I've got all this shiny new stuff. And to me, that just screamed, oh, he's a newbie. He doesn't know what he's doing. But that guy, and whether he knew what he was doing, at least his gear was old enough. It looked like it was worn and had been there, done that. And, the old saying, he had the t-shirt and wore it out. So it's funny. Think about that before you plunk buy now and put down that credit card, that there's going to come a moment where you're going to go, oh, this is cool and shiny and new. And then you're going to go, oh, but it doesn't look as experienced as that guy in the next lane over.
Well, and it doesn't do what you thought it was going to do, because you would think that, oh, this is going to make me a better shooter. No.
Yeah.
Only you can make you a better shooter, right? Yep. And you become a better shooter.
There's the crux of what we're talking about right there. You just said.
And only you can learn what other tools and equipment will help you to hone that edge.
Yeah.
And the problem too is that we have to wrestle with that again, back to the endorphin dump. We all like to buy stuff. I have to say, the older I get, the less interested in that. I mean, I can go to Harbor Freight, walk around the entire store, and come out and maybe have bought a bag of zip ties.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a time when I would get heart palpitations, and your hands would shake, right? And it's like, I really need that purple jack, and all that stuff. So,
well, I've said that going to the outdoor store or the gun store, there used to be a time I'm like you, I would be like almost quivery to go, and I could have this and I ought to buy that. And now I walk through and it's like, well, that's interesting, but I don't need it. And you walk out with nothing, and it's like, did something happen to me? Or I guess
it's feel better about it. Yeah. Well, you know what I do? It's like if you go to like a Cabela's or a Bass Pro or something, those used to be the Angels would sing "This Is Nirvana," right? I walk into the front door of a Bass Pro and it's like, oh my God, right?
Well, the mothership's only an hour from you, and I specifically drove there just to walk into that store.
Oh, it's true. It's got the NRA museum. It's got, I mean, it's unbelievable. It even smells right in there, It's like leather and gun oil and I don't know what it is, but I'm old enough now that I look at things and I think, wow, that's really cool. I mean, God forbid I even do this with guns now, but I look at things and I think, well, that's really cool. And then I envision it sitting in my closet.
Gathering dust.
Or it's like, well, that's a really good looking jacket.
Yeah.
It's like, yes. And then I would buy it and I would be happy and I would go home and wear it a couple times. And it would go in my closet with my 25 other really cool jackets that I bought.
Yep.
And so just, try to rein that in initially. I mean, I think if somehow, I'm sorry, manufacturers, that we're saying these things, but I think in the long run, it pays dividends, because you get people who then, when they buy your product, when they really need it and they put it to use and it performs well, then they're going to want to buy more products from you. But if somebody buys a $500 red dot sight from you and they don't even know how to put it on their gun, much less use it to its best ability, then they're going to be dissatisfied. They're going to think it's your fault. They're going to blame it on the site. They're going to blame it on, the guy who sold it to them. So,
yeah. The part I wanted to get to this is the actionable intelligence part of the program and the time we've got left. So I think we've made that point pretty clear. And I think if you've watched us at all, you kind of get where we're coming from on this, and hopefully we're making sense. From here on out, whether you're a brand new shooter or a very experienced shooter, I want to talk about what is the sweet spot, because use red dots as an example. You can go on Amazon and get one for less than $50. Or you can buy, say, Trigicon. I just happen to be wearing their hat today. Top quality stuff, and Vortex, very popular. Loophole. I mean, I could go on and on. So there's everything from $50 to probably the top end $800,000-$900,000 optics. And there's no right or wrong answer here, but Roy, your philosophy on where's that sweet spot for the majority of folks? Because, like you said, Harbor Freight, I've got my own cost benefit analysis that with a tool, if I'm going to use it one single time, I'll try to get a Harbor Freight job. But if I know I'm going to use it for 3 weeks and I'm going to build a new room, I'll probably buy a better quality, more mainstream name brand thing. But when we're talking about gun stuff, whether we're guns or accessories, how do you make that kind of purchase decision when you're looking at the range of stuff?
Well, I've learned too, and it takes time and it takes willpower. So I have two rules. First rule is I want to buy a new fill in the blank, right? So I'll look online, I'll go to the store, I'll handle them, I'll everything, but I do not buy one that first day.
Nah.
In other words, don't.
Yeah.
Because you are going to learn more. I mean, just the act of doing the research into looking for what you think you want to buy, you're going to learn a lot. And then as a matter of fact, sometimes you do a 180 and you realize, you know what, maybe I really don't need one of those, or I need one of these,
Yeah.
So that's rule one. The rule two is if you decide for sure that you need to put a red dot on your gun, don't go cheap, because you will regret it instantly and you will waste that $80 or, $100, because you're now going to have to buy a $350 one, which now costs you $450 because you just waste $100 on the other one. Right.
Yep.
And guns are the same way. You go and you say, well, I really want a 22 pistol, and there's this like old rusty something, and it's only $195, and I'll buy that. Don't stop. Right. Look at it, get that feeling out, go home, calm down, and now revisit that. Maybe I should wait a month. I'll have $200 more I can spend. And then you go back and you find, oh, there's that Ruger 2245 that's nice and clean. It's lightly used. Maybe that's the one I should buy. But, they said before, was it buy once, cry once?
Cry once. Yep.
And I have never not known that to be the case.
Exactly.
It just, and I think so shooting accessories are the same thing. It's not whoever has the most toys wins. It's really not. I mean, whoever has the most toys, I think, is an idiot and failed. So,
wow, that's pretty plain.
No, but I mean, unless you're using them all.
Yeah.
If you're a competition shooter and you're traveling, you're going to, yes, you probably have a half a dozen competition guns and you've got, all that. But if you're a weekend warrior, and I mean, you don't need much there,
Yeah.
You need a decent holster, a gun that's going to run, a half a dozen magazines, some good ammo, glasses and hearing protection, and then show up.
Yep.
So,
well, I think that dovetails into the final point I was going to make. And I think this is very important and it's philosophical. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, Roy. The idea that it's all about satisfaction, because if you buy a cheap whatever of any kind, are you going to be satisfied with that? But if you buy the, say, kind of mid-grade, which is where the vast majority of folks buy, I mean, that's almost a given that, and manufacturers know this, they'll give you a real cheap one, they'll give you a real expensive one, and know that 80 to 90% of sales will be that middle one. Whether it's the same product or not, if it's got the middle price, that's where everybody compromises. But if you do buy that middle ground gun, or there's a custom 1911, a Nighthawk, a Kimber, something like that, or you can get a good quality Springfield, Ruger, whatever. Are you going to be satisfied? And if you're not, you'll end up spending more money. You'll probably start buy 2 or 3 cheap ones, get the middle grade, not be satisfied, buy the most expensive. And then you're not going to be satisfied either, because it's like, well, now, as we said, I'm not, shooting in the professional leagues because it didn't make me any better. So that's the question I think we've all got to get to in our own minds is you got to be satisfied. Intellectually, the cheap version probably is not that good. That's cheap for a reason. The most expensive is probably very high quality. And if you're a pro level whatever, you probably need that. But if you're like the vast majority of what Eric Gelhaus calls normal Earth people, me and you and Roy and everybody else, the middle ground is probably the best way to go. But the key there is just be satisfied with it. So I know we call you the Missouri Buddha, Roy. So your thoughts on being satisfied with what you buy?
Well, people may not realize how manufacturers play that card. E- every manufacturer I know who sells anything other than Rolls Royce has the good, better, best,
Yeah.
right? If you're a leather maker, you'll say, well, you can buy this belt and it's $75, but you can buy a belt and a holster for $150. Or you can buy a belt and a holster and a mag pouch for $195. Well, see, that's good, better, best. So a guy goes to their website and he wants to buy a gun belt. So there it is, right? But he's going to look and just say, well, just for a few more dollars, heck, I can get a holster too, right? And then it goes, and that's where many people stop, right? But then the smart people might go, yeah, but for just a few more dollars, I get a complete set. And you can't tell me that that's not very satisfying feeling. And even though at the time they go, well, that's more money than I wanted to spend. When the box shows up from the holster maker and they have a new belt, a new holster, and a new mag pouch, they feel pretty nice about that. Because think about it, right? Because otherwise you'd get the gun belt and you'd say, oh man, I wish I would have bought the holster.
Yeah.
And I think guns and accessories of all kinds are exactly the same thing, and manufacturers do that. I mean, Ruger makes a basic 1022. They make a mid-range 1022, and then they make a high-end target 1022. And I mean, many people are happy with the entry-level gun, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if that's what you want to do, then that's what you should do. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think if you really want to be shooting and you're going to go hunting and you have some experience and all that, I think you'd make a mistake doing almost anything entry-level. You'd have to do just what you're talking about, which is at least go mid-range, and then as you get more sophisticated, as your tastes change, as you get more experience, as your income grows, as you get older, then now you can explore maybe getting that, a little higher end. I just did a video on the Bighorn Armory, their Model 89. It's a $6,000 lever action rifle, right? And the comments were really interesting. There were, well, I have a Rossi lever action and it's just as good. Well, it's good, and you should probably keep that, Rossi. Because here's someone who would probably not really understand what's going on here with this Bighorn Armory gun. Then there were a lot of people who said, boy, I've got a Marlin, I've got a this, I've always admired these high quality guns. My rifle does the job for me, but I can see where one of those would just be so much fun to use and buy. And it's like, yeah, it is, right? But they did good. They bought a good tool for what they needed. And then there's a few people who say, you know what? I saved my money. I bought one. It is the best, funnest darn thing. I love it. Every time I shoot it, I just love it. Everybody I show it to loses their minds, and so I think that's the balance, so if you can't appreciate that, then you shouldn't waste your money on it, but if you can appreciate it, it's better to do that than start at the bottom and slowly work your way up.
Well, that word is another great word to highlight in this episode, is appreciate.
I would say, what's another saying? Always spend more than you want to, never less than you should.
Good point.
Right?
Yeah.
And guns and gear are the same way. I mean, everything there is. So if you're serious and you want to get into shooting, for instance, go to the range, rent different guns, talk to all your friends, shoot their guns, educate yourself. And then when you go to buy that first gun, spend more than you want to, but not less than you should, because chances are good then you're going to be satisfied with that. And it'll be a gun that you can grow with. It'll be a gun that you'll likely keep in your collection. You might pass it on to your son or daughter or something. But because nothing is worse than, we make fun about Harbor Freight, but I mean, nothing truly is worse. Not so much now, but years ago, Harbor Freight was just terrible.
Agreed.
Tool
Agreed. They've upped
quality.
their game. Yeah.
They really have. I mean, pretty much everything works there. But I mean, I remember buying an electric tool, thinking, "Oh, good, I've got this like really cool electric tool now."
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
bring it home, and when you plug it in, you hear the gears grind.
Yeah. And then the
and
magical blue smoke.
yeah, and it's just like so unsatisfying. And you realize, well, I just spent, $89 on this. And so then, you take that back, or maybe you can't take it back. And then now you go to Home Depot or someplace and you spend the $150, which you should have spent to begin with,
Yep.
And then when you get home and you're running it, oh, it's quiet, it's smooth, it's got a lot of power, there's that satisfaction because,
Yep.
man, I've seen a lot of people get disillusioned. They go out and they buy some fill in the blank name brand cheapy crappy gun, and they go and they shoot it, and it's just not satisfying.
Yeah.
And then they think, well, this isn't any fun.
Yep.
And it is fun. You just did it the wrong way.
Exactly. Well, great points. And again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, but just be educated. Try to take your emotion, your reptile brain out of it a little bit. Don't fall for the marketing hype. And again, even we do it. But I was going to point out the big dichotomy going away is when I got to be editor of Guns Magazine, it's by virtue of what we do, it's wonderful. It's a blessing. We get gear all the time. And there reaches a point where you get beyond cool, the as we call it, the brown truck of joy showed up. And now, and some of this is Roy's influence, but I've got too much crap here and I just give away stuff. And I'm trying to downsize from 2 paid storage units to at least 1. And a lot of it's just stuff that I got, and then there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not something that makes my life better. And you're kind of conflicted in getting rid of it. But my point I'm trying to make here is having more gear does not make you the winner. And it certainly doesn't change your skill level. And I've got a friend who owns a burial vault company, and he often points out so far in the thousands of funerals he's worked, he's never seen a hearse with a luggage rack or pulling a trailer. So that kind of puts it in perspective.
Diehard hunters, and you're probably one of these that you go to their like hunting room. Or the portion of their garage that has the hunting stuff. And there's, a dozen different packs and, 5 different waders and 35 spinning reels. And, the list goes on.
I've just got that in my garage.
Well, shooters are the same way. And I think that the biggest thing for me is, because I've done it and you've done it and everybody does it, but is don't be in a rush to buy everything, because you're going to end up like that. You're going to have a shelf full of holsters. You're going to have a shelf full of other things that you never, ever use. So if you could be smart enough to just a step at a time, it's more satisfying. You'll save your money. You won't waste it on things you don't need. You'll be able to buy better things when you finally make the buying decision, And frankly, almost across the board, fewer is usually better, because you can focus on learning to use what you have rather than just acquiring.
Yep. The more crap you have, the less freedom you have in your life. And I truly believe that. So, well, Roy, a great topic, great discussion. We need to get on out of here. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, please leave us a comment. I'd like to hear what you think, and I'm sure we will. And then if you're listening to us on an audio podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, some of those, you can always reach out and send us an email. That's editor@gunspodcast.us. And I've been bad lately not responding to the emails, but I do certainly read them, and we certainly appreciate it. So before we get out of here, of course, make sure you check out gunsmagazine.com. I just had a piece this week, it should be published now, where I went back and reviewed stuff that I reviewed 2-3 years ago in Guns Magazine. And it's kind of funny, not to get off on a separate topic, but I realized there's a lot of gear that we review, and then that's the last time it sees the light of day. It goes on the shelf. And then there's gear that I still use almost every day. And I thought, I'll go back and do the redo gear review, so you can check that out, gunsmagazine.com. Of course, if you want to buy some merch, and we've been selling some merch, t-shirts, sweatshirts, mugs, you can go to gunspodcast.us, and you can also see some of my writing and other fun stuff there. It's kind of just a junk drawer of fun and interesting stuff, and so you can check that out, gunspodcast.us and gunsmagazine.com. So anyway, Roy, let's get on out of here. Appreciate you taking time to talk about this. As always, you've got great insight from many years of shooting. So on behalf of Roy Huntington, I'm Brent Wheat, the host of Guns Podcast US. And as I always remind you, now it's time to get out there and get shooting.